Looks like an old man. So we're back to the same 3 topics. Is that correct? Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, talk number 2. So first of all, is any questions about what I talked about earlier? I can continue to discuss that, but yes.
There was a leftover question from the monastery.
Yes.
Let's see. From Shoka.
I know him.
He asked, what is the difference between observe/meditation and see it /prajna?
Meditation is you're probably going to feel like you're doing something. You're actually observing something. You're going to have a sense of an observer who is seeing something else. Could be the wall, could be your thoughts coming and going. The imputation of an observer is it's going to be there as part of the awareness or consciousness practice, at least initially. And then slash what? Prajna.
Yeah, see it /prajna.
So to see it is there's nothing extra. There's you see it, but there's no one seeing it. Wisdom is without anyone who's wise. Wisdom is without a seer. No, that's a word that's been used. But the idea there is that you don't really get rid of a witness situation. You see that it is just as unreal as what is being observed. This is wisdom. It doesn't come, it doesn't go, it doesn't get larger, it doesn't get smaller. And it is practically impossible to point out as something where you can say, well, just look right there. That's wisdom. So one has a path, there's the ground, which may show up as difficulty, but also the ground path and fruition of the path. The Buddhist path is Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, or a discipline, meditation, wisdom, or hold still, observe, see what it is, see what this is. And so that doesn't have the element of subjectivity. Objectivity is it may still be there, it may still come and go, but it has more of a phantom-like quality to it. It's not really real. You don't need it. You don't care if it stays. You don't care if it goes. You add nothing to it by way of your elaboration, ideas, conviction. You don't even think, I'm wise. You don't even think, finally I'm wise. After all this struggle. Nothing you are not concluding anything. Conclusions may appear. I'm not trying to be silly about it, but there's no real concluder. There's no one doing that. Just things come together and then they open up and they go another direction and you just observe. It's like you're in the clouds. The ego mind in the clouds is going to think spaced out. But wisdom mind, there's no spaced out. There's no clarity. There's no lack of clarity. No clarity, no lack of clarity. The path is clarity about the lack of clarity, about confusion. That's why it's difficult, because we don't get much encouragement from what we're experiencing. That's why and I was talking earlier about Shine and Lockdown, or resting in tranquility, or panoramic awareness, which are 2 ways of talking about stabilizing and then seeing what it is. So I don't teach it that way, and because I don't think it's necessary. And that's not based on a conclusion. I actually began doing that without really concluding anything about it. I just kind of looked back and noticed that I was no longer teaching the way I was taught. What was I doing? I was teaching to whoever was in front of me. I didn't you could say I was customizing it, but it was doing it itself. I would meet someone and I would talk to them and I would realize that I don't need to teach them to follow their breath. Not that they shouldn't, but that should be up to them to do that. Just like I don't teach silence. Even in a retreat, I don't teach noble silence or what's that other kind of silence?
Functional speech.
Functional speech. It's not that you couldn't do that, but that ought to be up to you, not up to somebody setting up a structure. Again, I'm not saying that shouldn't happen in some places. You went to Tassajara or Green Gulch or Zen Mountain Monastery, or even over at the Zen Temple in Detroit, not too far away, you're going to find that kind of structure. If you need that kind of structure, you won't be interested in what I have to say. You're going somewhere else. And I would say, go get it. Go, that's what you want. It's out there. There's no particular propaganda saying ours is better. It's not better. The better and worse and bigger and smaller, that's all extra. But if I say sit down, hold still, and watch what moves, then out of your own karma, your own causes and conditions, your own confusion, and out of your Buddha nature, you'll look exactly. You will look at exactly what you need to look at if it is moving. How do I know? I don't. It's not about knowledge. It's not about conclusions. It's not about relative truth. I don't know much. So it's just a way of talking about it. It's not disagreeing with anyone. Certainly there's a lot of people that probably should go and study under Tibetan lamas or other Zen teachers or whatever they want to do, or come up with their own kind of meditation. There's, I think in the last time I looked in, I can't remember whether it was kinds of therapies or kinds of meditation, but it was around 150. I think it was 148 of one and 152 of the other. I just lied. I have no idea what it is. But it's probably a lot. And if you say, I meditate, you have no idea what that person does. Not only that, we have, take a half a dozen people here who are students of mine, and they say they all meditate. You still don't know what people are doing. There's no way you can get into anybody else's consciousness, brain pan, or see. And everyone is doing this differently. And the value of doing this differently is that you're actually making the path your own immediately. You don't need to go through kindergarten, first grade, second grade. You don't have to go through that first. You actually get to start where you're at, which is the title, I think, of one of Pema's books. Start where you are. Well, then we should teach where we are. If you're watching what moves, that may be some kind of dynamic that is totally different from the person sitting right next to you. You may be just watching your breath come and go for a while, even though you weren't particularly told that. You might be watching that for a while. Then the person next to you may be listening to the traffic out in the parking lot, or another person may be watching the rehearsal of what they're going to say when they meet up with their spouse or their maid or their children or about some issue or problem. But it's always about watching what moves, never about joining it, passion, rejecting it, aggression, or turning away, ignorance. Excuse me. And if you can do that, then slowly the awareness itself starts to use a relative image. It just starts to get more prioritized. The way I say all the time, the metaphor or the visual image, I say, spend our whole life leading with our concepts, our ideas, our evaluation process. What's right? What's wrong? What should I do? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? How should I handle this situation? But through this practice of meditation, without even being able to measure it, even know about it, we just slowly the awareness, the wisdom mind starts to come out in front. We start to lead with our awareness. We have a willingness, because we are no longer threatened by anything. We have a willingness to just live in the open dimension of this moment, which never goes away. This moment has never appeared, therefore cannot vanish. And if you want to enter in with any kind of debate about that, I'd be happy to debate with you. Or ask questions. Or you can answer questions. I could ask questions. How did Sally get to be such a great painter? I really love that one around the corner. Also, the one right around the corner. Masterpiece.
So for a brain that is full of analysis and tinkering and tooling, what is clarity?
Well, the first step could be knowing that it's not just your brain. The brain is just a processing, it's just an organ that handles that in terms of consciousness. But your liver is consciousness. Your bloodstream has awareness. Everything is happening. You're a nurse. You're still a nurse? Okay. Aren't you some kind of a mountain also, though, Isan? What kind of mountain is that? A healing mountain? That's what I thought. Who named you that? Okay. So did that answer the question?
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So I'm trying to, you said clarity and not lack of clarity, or I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it seemed like, not separate, not two. So I find myself always striving for clarity, trying to be clear about what I want, what other people are telling me, what's
Okay.
in the world. And I don't usually understand what clarity is or feel like I've achieved any sort of clarity about most things. Is that because
That's awareness.
there isn't clarity?
Clarity is a concept about confusion. No, those two are not separate. They're separated so that we can mix it up and talk and evaluate our world and judge this, judge that.
Is clarity, is confusion, there's no way out of confusion, really? You just have to be with the confusion? Is that?
One of the problems is initially the provisional areas to separate yourself from the confusion, which is a deeper form of confusion, is to try to get away from not liking that. Second noble truth is wanting things to be different than they are. If you see the confusion, don't run away, don't cover it up, don't label it, do nothing. I mean, you could label it, but don't do much with it. Just let the confusion be there. The dependent origination, the causes and conditions that arise and manifest as that particular perception of confusion are untraceable. And the energy behind them is probably, I don't know, how would I say it? Unshut-offable. You can't find an off switch. You can't find you can't, because it has its own causes and conditions and cause and effect situation. They're very complicated. So it may shut down just by watching it for a while. Confusion doesn't really want too much of a witness going on. It doesn't mind a witness as long as it can manipulate the witness. But it doesn't like the witnessing while being watched, of someone observing and not doing something. You've all noticed sometime you're right in the middle of any situation. We talked about this earlier. You're there, you're in a situation, and you're not doing much, but you're seeing a confusion in front of you, and you're just watching it. You watch it, and it just gets more confusing, and then eventually the whole thing just blows up and then goes away. And then somebody else watching you watch it comes and says, "My, how did you do that? Are you scared?" You know what I'm saying? And then you weren't confused then, but now you're kind of confused about why other people weren't able to see what was happening there, that you weren't particularly put off by that. You were just watching what happened. There's no big example of authentic presence necessarily, but at least you weren't adding to the confusion by criticizing that person. But then another person can't just stand not knowing what that was about, like seeing someone have something happened and the other person just not participating. It's not that they're turning away, not judging, that might not be doing anything at all. So it's an area that we've all experienced to some extent. Quite often that'll happen if somebody wants to argue with you. You don't really want to argue, but you don't want to leave them, so you listen. And you might say, I see what you mean. And then the person will get upset because they think you're getting uppity. You know, oh, so you're the person who never gets mad at anyone. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great for you that you've gotten over your anger. And I'm stuck with all of it. What's that called? Therapy. So just observing what happens insofar as you can without doing too much adding on. If you find yourself spontaneously adding on to anything with ideas about it, you don't have to correct anything, but just watch the dynamics. It takes a while to do that, including assuming that this is a brain. It's not necessarily, the brain is an organ that is some kind of a processing situation, but consciousness is not a thing. Consciousness is not trapped in a body. Consciousness can come and go. You can move your consciousness right out to the parking lot. You actually can move it. You won't have any proof of it, but you can do that, especially if you practice doing it, and especially if you're a Pisces. But Pisces don't want to do that because that's too scary. So they don't do it. And what am I saying? I'm saying, I don't know. The awareness of consciousness is your awareness, and you can actually be responsible. What I mean by responsible, the ability to respond. You have the ability to respond to whatever's happening. You see it, and you see this is red, this is blue, this is a cardinal, this is a truck going down the road. You're responsible. You're you don't have to blame for anything. You don't get credit for anything, but you're responsible for everything.
Is confusion clarity? So if we look at our political shenanigans,
Mm-hmm.
it sure looks like confusion to me. Is that really clarity?
It's not separate from clarity. Otherwise, you wouldn't know it was confusion. I mean, you can label it confusion, which just may mean you could say it, well, this is happening, that's happening, this is happening. I don't know how that got there, but that shouldn't be in the way. And this looks pretty threatening. And somebody's believing this and disbelieving that. And it just doesn't seem to be much communication, cooperation, collaboration doesn't seem to be people working together for the idea of having a sane, kind, uplifted, even pleasant environment or a mandala or container. It's just it's because of the intense greed, which isn't just the characters that are on the stage right now, but are the ones that have been showing up there for centuries and centuries. This has been going on, different developments. This happens. We're at the turning of the screw, where this is the particular person that, because of their dynamic, they get to come into this, and then they'll pass out, and something else will come up. And it's difficult, but it's not something that just suddenly happened, which everything was fine. This is by when we hear people say they want to return to something. Yeah, let's go back and stick our head under the garbage can for another 3 decades. More?
So in times like that you just described, would using concepts like kindness or generosity be a way to assess whether a situation is confusing or clear?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I think I asked you if confusion were clarity, and you said yes.
The way you seem to be asking it, I would say yes.
But when I look at what's going on in the world politically, that doesn't look like clarity to me.
Okay.
So how does it look to you?
For confusion. Keep going.
So, but to declare something either clarity or confusion is separation.
Well, we apparently need to talk about it. That's why we go and sit and face the wall, so you can just listen to your own mind. That's why we go into retreat occasionally, so you can get a really big, strong dose of just how crazy you are. That's clarity. To hide out from your own confusion, seal yourself off, just creates more suffering. We've got some suffering coming in the sense of causes and conditions, or you wouldn't be a human being. This is, as the Buddha said, life is suffering. Being alive is suffering. There's difficulty, different kind of form of that for everyone. So trying to get away from that creates more suffering. More.
So would it be coming to a conclusion about any situation is
Okay.
where the, I want to say fault lies?
There's no real fault. The idea of it's about being aware that we come to a conclusion and stuff. I'm not about stopping it. So when I say don't conclude, you can't help that. I'm concluding about everything all the time, but we should be aware that we're concluding. Be aware of that, and that way, if you see that, then there's clarity about that that tendency to try to cover up. And if you're clear about that, then it doesn't have the polarized kind of situation happening. Then it may keep going for a while because its causes and conditions are unsearchable, unfindable, or it may slow right down just depending, because what you're doing is you're not going in there with your agenda about anything. You're endeavoring, if you're on this path, to be aware, just to be aware. You're going to give what? Give everything your attention. Generosity, very simple form of just give everything your attention. See what it is. Go ahead.
Sometimes you use the idea of vibration, higher vibration and lower vibration. This morning you were talking about energy, that if what comes, it goes. I don't know if you said in equal measure, but something like that.
I doubt it.
Never mind then.
No, I meant equal measure. I doubt that.
Well, you said as much comes, it goes. Does anybody remember what he said? How he said it?
I might have said that.
So anyway,
Challenge me.
okay, so I'm going to take that metaphor then. Or not.
Okay, come on. You passed the test.
So let's just say like a big ball of negative energy that feels like anger. So you're talking
Yes.
about high vibration. Let's just say it's low vibration. And
Yes.
it's just like, no matter what, it's whether that's going to stick a while. Heavy, low.
Yes.
If it's going to remain energy, not created or destroyed. You talk about higher vibration as we're working with that like low negativity. Is there any way to transmute or transform that into that same? Do you know?
Yeah, I think possibly you could use the word transmute or transform. Or I think it's possible to do that, but I think it isn't something, even though it's taught different in different traditions, including shamanism or Tibetan Buddhism. I think it's from the point of view of the way I understand it, it's about really seeing very deeply into the negative energy itself without any agenda. In other words, being able to be in that negative energy without, I'm not saying you might not feel some threat, but not using that threat as some reason to hightail it, or some reason to fight, or some reason to shut down and protect yourself. So I think it's just being available to anything. Another way that it's said is, whatever emotions come and go in your mind, positive, negative, or neutral, you don't have a particular personal idea about it, about what should happen or what shouldn't happen. In other words, you're with the feeling. It may feel terrible, but that's all there is. It's just, we've all had feelings of negativity that we want a story about. I don't know why I feel this way. Quite often if that happens, then definitely we start to call it what? Depression. Let's call it depression. And then if you tell anybody about it who has the credentials to do this, they'll probably try to medicate it, not cure it or something, because it can't be done that way, but try to cover it up with something so you won't feel that way. Like my situation has been done with insulin for so many years, try to cover up the problem with that, not actually solve it. So go ahead.
So let's say, you've experienced this before and you see that it's weather, but at the same time, the energy it's like kinetic energy. It's got power and it's going to move in some direction. As it's moving you, is there any way to work with that physical engagement to, pacify or shift it?
Insofar as I understand, I would say what you're saying, I think the most important thing to do with that, especially to you personally, I might say it different to someone else, but to you personally, I would say on the cushion, sit down and see if that will arise on the cushion. And don't endeavor to make it happen, but just watch what the mind does closely without any commentary. The more elimination can happen, the better. So just what you're doing is eliminating physical movement. You're insofar as you can without being struggling with it or without going into a mantra or going into a visualization. You're just going to watch what moves very simply, rather than push or pull. 3 poisons: push, pull, or ignore. Just watch what moves.
What if it's something, it could be anger, it could be anything, but the energy of it is so intense that you can't even hold still, like you want to go run or something?
Well, 2 things you can do. You can sit still or run. And I would say that would, again, I put that on the meditator. You may, anyone that talks to me very much is probably doing something slightly different than everybody else, because I'm trying to help you work with the particular way in which you're, whatever area you're struggling with. And some people have no difficulty at all with, some people are just fine, everything's going fine. And other people are intensely suffering. And so those are quite often addressed quite a bit differently. So maybe that's why I had studied so many different directions, so I can stop putting anything on anybody and wait and see who's sitting in front of me, what's happening. I'm sure you've gotten a good dose of that, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
You have scars to prove it.
Yeah.
Good.
Let's see.
Not bad. Not that needy for entertainment.
So,
Yes.
As a meditator, we practice awareness, and you might feel something that's engaged in cycling off the cushion as you're walking around. And that's like, what? Why the hooks? It seems ridiculous, but you can't argue with it. It just is there.
Question.
So, if it's too hot to take it to the cushion, how do you work with that when you see it's absurd, but at the same time, it's just doing its thing?
Just lots of circularity. And don't use the intellect, which is saying it's absurd, as a helpmate. If it comes in one time and says, "Oh, this is absurd," let that go by. Don't keep repeating that little thought balloon in order to keep you from looking at it, because you need to look at it, and the thought pattern will come up and masquerade as with credentials as a surgeon. They're saying, "I'll take care of that for you. We'll just analyze that and think about it." Probably not going to work. That will just go in another. It might back off because the conceptual wall of the concepts or ideas or conviction about the analysis becomes very strong, and we begin to be protected. We might still feel some of the heat from that, but it will probably go underground and go back. And what needs to happen, as far as I understand it, needs to be just experienced for what it is. Just let it do whatever it needs to do. And you'll notice that no one gets destroyed, no one gets promoted, and no one gets ignored. There is one. That's why. It's not because there's no ignoring, no passion, aggression, or ignorance. There isn't any solid being there that is at the mercy of anything that negativity has to say. It's just negativity. It's just feeling without a feeler. But as long as you think there's a feeling that where you need to know why, that's why I say why questions are circular. If you have a why question, you're going to get a whole bunch of causes. And quite often they're the most simple, most available story. They're the last thing that happened to you is the slightest bit negative. You could be blaming that. Blame takes you in circles. And it's not wrong. It's just circular. But if there isn't any solid being there, you might experience negative feelings even more intensely because there's no solid self there anymore. When I talk about an open dimension, I'm saying those of you who know about the seventh consciousness of the Yogacara teachings of the eight consciousnesses, that seventh consciousness just starts to break apart. It can no longer shield you from anything because there isn't anyone. There never was anyone. It isn't like suddenly you got rid of yourself. Your ego might still hang around in the hallway and looking through the window. Can I come back in? Promise not to be me. There isn't anyone. There's no solid being. Even though whatever you're noticing right now is your me feeling, go to that. Say, who's listening to this? And then say, you don't have to do it out loud, but say, me. Find that. See if there's someone there. There's only hearing. There's no one hearing. There's only smelling. There's no one smelling. The six sense fields, including the mind, are just here and they're functioning just fine. They don't need the help from some kind of solidified glob of me that is having this or having that. You don't need to have that. You don't need it. You don't need to keep reifying some. You can tell if I start insulting everybody in the room, you'll all know right where your ego is, this glob is automatically. Or if I start complimenting everybody, you'll know that. You'll sense what that is. But if that could still be there, but if you know that that's just unreal, there's no way I can offend you or by a couple of critical words. You might even laugh. Yes.
So what is it that knows that's not real?
Wisdom. And wisdom doesn't belong to anyone. There's no one who's wise. That's why it says you realize your Buddha nature. You realize your awakened nature. The Buddha was not an actual being. I mean, he was born, but he was a transcendent being. And so are you. And so is everyone here. Don't believe a word I say. Don't disrespect me by believing what I say. It's disrespectful. I'm not here, as I said many times, I've said, I don't need followers. I don't want any followers. If I want anything, I want Buddhas. I want the Buddha. I want you to see that you're not separate from the Buddha. You are awakened. And that's not something to just have an opinion of. Yes. Did you have a question? You should ask the question. Don't be selfish. What is it?
If there's no one here, then why do all the causes and conditions stick?
Why do they stick? Because we think there's someone. We think there's someone. The causes and conditions, we take them personally. Is a simple way of putting it. We think there's some. If we have a feeling, we have a body-mind complex. There's a being here. This is dependent origination. It's just a paratantra, or just causes that. Your mom and dad got together, and they got together, and you're here, and you're in a building, and you know me, and you know her, and we're causes and conditions, and that's it. At the same time, that doesn't mean you can't appreciate the music, or you can't appreciate the sound of a cardinal. This whole thing won't come together because the harmony is already the case. It's just that we've been looking away, and we could be so much appreciating our world. It's sacred. And there's nothing profane anywhere. It's a misunderstanding. More.
Why does that affect us why is it talked about affecting us into the future, us, as in there's something that it follows, like a self or a projection?
Do I do that?
Well, the teachings do. What is that? What's being talked about?
Where do you hear that in the teachings? I'm not saying you don't. I'm just trying to see what area can I argue with it.
Like find out who you are before you die so that you're not taking that with you and that confusion. But if there's no one here, what's the confusion?
Because of that thinking that there's someone here goes beyond this body-mind complex. When this body-mind complex goes down, you're not going anywhere other than whatever you're grasping and rejection and ignoring takes you to another lifetime, a lifetime in another world. I'm not predicting anything. I'm not even saying any of that exists. I don't need to know anything else. Everything is obvious right now, and it's obvious to you if you look at it. Stop shutting it out. Then it may not be comfortable, or it may be comfortable, or maybe the sound of a cardinal. Could be almost anything, but it's causes and conditions that are always showing up and disappearing. It's called impermanence. There is something that's permanent. You probably use that word, but it's risky, so I don't recommend it.
What is permanent?
Something that doesn't change. But any phenomena changes. What doesn't change? Find out. I can't show you. All I can say is safe. Yes.
In your presence.
You mean like birthday or Christmas?
When you give me presents. When you're around, or when I'm sitting or in silent retreat, there's a sense of openness. And when I'm at temple, but then when I leave and come home, I'm really grumpy. Mm-hmm. And almost to the point where my family and friends know that I come home and how is she and when is this meditation going to start working?
Don't mind their business.
The aggression seems to grow. Is there some way in training that's increasing it?
No. Just watch it. It's going to be different with each person. So if someone else might not have that situation at all, that's just your particular way of learning, of understanding what this is. And that's just basically saying there's been some kind of an assumption about it maybe being the other way that's starting to break down. Just let it be. You're doing exactly what you need to do. And your family, friends, Ani, or whomever else they just going to have to like it, or was it like it or lump it? That's what I used to say when I was a kid. Just, excuse me, you don't really have to look out for them. You don't have to really act in such a way that they're, that you don't offend them or anything. You might be very offensive. You might explode and get upset and mad, but just don't follow it up with any justification. And just say, when is this going to start working? And say, well, you live your life for you. I'm living my life for myself. I mean, you might not say what I just said, but you're living your life. Have somebody, you need me to live a different way, be a different person. This includes your son. Back him into a corner. He's your son. You don't have to take any of that lip. You could tell that I said that. I mean, after all, he's changed my way of thinking about water forever. So.
It's not a problem.
Oh, okay. Well, then there's no problem. Do you follow me a little bit? Whatever's occurring, that's what's occurring. To go with someone like, well, maybe I've been meditating, why am I doing better? Especially when that's coming from somebody else. They're kind of evaluating you. Any of these people who are training their minds at all? No. Even if they were, it's still your path. It's not someone else's. You need to do what you need to do. You may need to go, especially if you've been working for a while, avoiding certain things and trying to be another person. And then you, through this practice, especially if you're hanging around me very much, you might have to be dick. Sorry. I apologize. You might, in other words, you might have to be who you are. You might have to have the negativity that's been arising. You might have to be that. You might have to, not actually, it's not a justification for being a certain way, but you might have to have some negativity come in that you're no longer going to fight with. You're going to make friends with yourself because you see that you can't uproot that. It'd be like pulling off your ears or something. You can't do it. So just be kind to yourself. Don't worry about others. They'll take care of themselves. And when I'm sure they would notice, I certainly notice that if somebody needs your help, you'll drop everything to help them. No doubt about it. So that's what you do. You're a whole, as an acupuncturist and using Chinese medicine, everything that you do is about others, about helping people. So enough said, no compliments, just a description. More? Laura, did you have a question?
My question was just related to when you were talking about waking up and realizing our Buddha nature. It's just a curious question of, does it happen instantly or gradually?
Both and neither. I mean, it could and it couldn't. And I'm not here to validate anybody's experience particularly, but it's so very with causes and conditions and everyone's karma and what everyone's been through, not only in this lifetime, but in other apparent lifetimes. It's just so complicated. But if you're in this room, you're listening to this teaching, then you probably are ready to see this, to understand it. There's no guarantee. Maybe you have to come back again and again. But to see it, it isn't a relative thing necessarily. It has a relativity to it because that's why we work with the teachings, why we work with sitting, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. You just see it. And that seeing it may have to happen over and over again before you understand what it is, instead of seeing it and say, well, why did it go away? If you think it went away, you didn't see it. And if you think it appeared, that's your imagination. And you might say, why am I talking like that? Why am I saying that? Why would I say that? It's because I want you to see this. I don't want to say this in such a way that you can just move into your thought patterns about it. I would rather have it be, this is why in so many traditions, not only the Zen tradition, but other traditions, that we run into an area where we just, there's an area where making sense is not the point. It's because it goes beyond the relative logic of the thinking mind. Transcends it. That's why it's been likened to jumping off a cliff. That's why it's the finger pointing at the moon. If you look at the moon, you no longer see the finger, and you no longer see the finger, you get paranoid, and because there's nothing. The moon is, there's nothing to. What is a moon anyway? So you'd rather, let's just stay with the finger. We can describe that finger perfectly. You know.
Sokuzan from the monastery has a question. If the same thought balloon keeps showing up, how can we look at what's behind it?
So there's a little variation there. If it's happening on the cushion, then it's just a matter of continuing to look at that without discarding it, without adding extra thoughts about it, like here I go again, anything extra. If you can just look at that and you'll see that anything you look at only gets its stability or any kind of apparent relative stability from being objected to. Like that, here I go again. Or, well, the reason I'm thinking this is because of this and this and this. It'll tend to hang around for a while and give off a foul odor. So in other words, just whatever shows up is just that, nothing added. It doesn't need to stay there. It doesn't need to go. It doesn't point to something else. So there's no praise, no blame. So I think the more we can just let it be there. When I say let, even that's a little bit extra. Just do nothing with it. And that, of course, takes what? Mind training. We need to sit down and train the mind for all the times when not much happens. And maybe all we feel is, spaced out. We just sit and we just feel spaced out. And the next time we're not spaced out at all. We're thinking about our taxes, or we're thinking, you might spend 20 minutes actually vacating the whole zendo or the whole meditation hall or the sanctuary or your meditation room at home and being in some kind of a spiral about how that shouldn't have happened. And if the neighbor hadn't have done this, and the next time that happens, I'm going to do it this other way. And then, there's maybe somebody closes the door down the hallway and then you're back in your body. It shows you how awareness is all over the place. And it doesn't have to be held still. Yes.
Is what you just described meditation?
Yes.
So what would be the difference between meditation and a daydream?
From the point of view of their structure and their form, they're the same.
What other point of view is there?
No point of view. Keep going. You have to ask the question. I have a prepared answer already.
Okay, I'll hear your answer.
Not separate. It's not separate. The separation is something that is imputed that causes circularity. I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad. We shouldn't do that, we should do this. As if there's somewhere else other than this. There isn't time and space are illusory. I'm not saying there isn't stuff and an apparent movement through time from here to the supper table. I'm not saying that isn't happening. I'm just saying that from the point of view of ultimate reality, it's illusory, which is no point of view particularly. And your mind, your awareness can stop ignoring that space and grasping at objects and ideas and concepts and living in some kind of relative warfare going on. Warfare, peace fair. You can do both. Be both. How do I know? You know how I know this.
So in answer to Juzan's question, I think you said that there are like a couple ways to work with that or to look at it. One was on the cushion. And then
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And then in every day, what we call post-meditation, just stay with whatever's occurring. If you have some negative things coming up, which I understood that's what she was saying, some kind of particular thought pattern, was that what it was?
Okay.
I would come up, then rather than fixate on that by saying, I can't get rid of that, or here it comes again, or, well, I probably should be thinking this because of this and this and this, or any kind of artificial stabilization, judgment or anything, is when you see that, don't disregard it and don't grasp it or accept it or explain it, or don't reject it or fight with it or push it away, passion, aggression, and ignorance, but include. What do you include? The other 5 sense fields: sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of hearing, sense of smelling, sense of seeing. Those are all part of this present. They are this present moment. It's the only way that's how we refer to it at present moment. But the mind is never in the present moment. It's always somewhere else, wandering around into things like this. So give that thought process, to say it in a homely kind of way, or I should say folksy kind of way, is give it how gravity feels, how your clothes feel, how colors, just receive colors without knowing what they're called. Be in the world 100%. And that's something you can actually practice as meditation in action if you want to. I mean, you asked the question, so I would say don't necessarily let the tyranny of the thought process take everything over and shut down and put all your sense fields in cages. You can't. All you know is what color something is. You can't join. That's part of the reason it gets so much power, is because it's like a oligarch, and it does this through what? Fear. Any further questions? It's 3 minutes before Rusheen leaves, and
What did you just say?
I just said it's 3 more minutes before Rasheen leaves, and then Cleta's going to leave right now.
Stay in 3 minutes.
All right. 1 3-minute question and a 2-minute answer. And then we'll start.
You're
Okay.
talking about how awareness can be anywhere, it doesn't have to be right here in the parking lot or whatever. Could you put your awareness someplace you've never been?
Yeah, I've never been behind your head. Just right now behind your head.
Are you sure?
Huh?
Are you sure you've never been behind my head?
Am I sure?
I mean, if you're imagining it, let's just say there's I don't know, like pick a country I've never been to.
Yeah, France. I'm in France right now. I'm in Brittany, but I'm not alone. Mayun is there, aren't you, Mayun? Maybe she's not. She might be sound asleep. So when we're doing that, we're just, there's no proof. It's just a way of working. If you move the consciousness, it's just interesting. Like we were talking about earlier in our interview, the way that consciousness, and not to go into that, it's personal, but the way that consciousness was working, we don't need proof for that. We know this. We know that. So, very good. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit. That's hard on your cushion.
May the merit penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist community and the places we practice, our families, friends, and all beings. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering until the moonlight.